All right, Jason, let's talk about QSBS. This was a really fun policy dive for me because I've never had to deal with it, so I didn't actually know it in enough detail. For folks who don't know, it's called the Qualified Small Business Stock Exemption, or just QSBS in kind of the lingua franca. And it was expanded in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So, Jason, previously, QSBS allowed investors in a C Corp specifically that had assets of less than $50 million at the time of their investment to, if they held their stock for 5 years, not pay capital gains tax on up to $10 million of the value of their investment. A perk, a benefit for people who invested into smaller companies to not pay capital gains tax on potentially some of their gains. Now, it's been expanded in a couple of ways. First of all, instead of having to wait 5 years now to earn this benefit, you can now avoid capital gains tax on 50% of your holdings at 3 years, 75% at 4 years, up to 100% at 5 years. Also, the cap has been raised from 10 million to 15 million. And even better, that will go up over time with inflation. And one last thing that I saw that changed in the bill is that companies can now have up to $75 million in assets instead of 50 at the time of the investment to give their investors this access to a tax benefit. I think that there's going to be a lot of people on your group text who are very excited about this.
It's certainly a benefit if you are an angel investor or you're an LP in early stage companies. Now, if you're investing in Mira from OpenAI's $10 billion company, that doesn't count, right? Because if they raise $1 billion, they have $1 billion in cash. It's kind of hard to argue that company's worth less than 50 million. But if you invested in Coinbase, if you invested in Uber, Airbnb, in that first couple of years, well, it wasn't worth more than 10, 20, 30, $40 million. Therefore, you got this little incentive. If you put in, I don't know, $100,000 and it turned into 10 million, you wouldn't have to pay those federal taxes on that first 10 million in gains, but you had to hold it for 5 years. So you think about the timing of this. You have to really thread the needle. When you make the investment, it's got to be a tiny enterprise under 50 million in value. They have to file and say, hey, the CFO of the company or the investors have to make a note on a piece of paper and say, yes, this company is worth under 50 million. It qualifies for QSBS. If you were to start the company and buy $1 billion in servers, you can't claim it's under 50 million. So this wouldn't work for, XAI or CoreWeave, at a certain investment level. But it would work for a software company or a social network, et cetera, marketplace. If you hold it, then you get this incredibly generous. If you were to save, 30% on your capital gains tax, and I think it's just the federal tax. If you save that money, you can save a couple of $1 million. It's kind of like a little pot sweetener. It's not enough to drive people to become angel investors, to become LPs in seed funds, but it's certainly nice. And it does come up in our world. Hey, was that a QSBS company? Fantastic. My first $10 million in gains. And typically it's like a gain of $1 million. So you're talking about somebody saving low 6 figures in the average case or high 8 figures. It's not as juicy as it sounds. It's nice. It does, I think, drive people. If they got rid of it, I think you'd lose 20, 30% of angel investors. So there are, I would say, 1 out of 5 people who consider this like a driving force for them, and it got them off the benches. And we should be thinking more and more about this. Now, I could understand socialists. I've been watching this Socialism 2025 conference. Somebody's taking all these clips from these wacky socialists in this conference talking about taking over the means of production and getting rid of the state and, seizing people's assets and stuff like that. I can understand this being triggering because it's well, you're an angel investor. You make a ton of money and then you don't pay tax. What about, somebody who's working at McDonald's or Starbucks? Should they have to pay taxes? The truth is, when you look at the actual amount of tax coming in, those people don't pay tax. They pay almost nothing into the overall budget of cities, states, and governments. So if you're actually looking at the numbers, it's inconsequential to the budget, the amount of money being paid by baristas, as just an example, or Uber drivers. Whatever taxes they're paying, it drives nothing. It doesn't pay for anything in the budgets. 90% of the taxes are paid by the top 10 or 20%, depending on the region you're in. And, it's a kind of interesting concept here for people to think about. Oh, and that thing with you have to hold it for 5 years. Okay. But what if the company gets bought early? What happens if they get bought 3 or 4 years after? And now they've made a little concession there. So I guess this is one of these tiny things in these giant bills that whoever lobbied for it I don't know who is lobbying for this, maybe the National Venture Capital Association or somebody lobbied for this heavily and got it. But it's kind of how our system works. It doesn't make an impact on my life, I'll be honest. I would still do what I do with or without this.
Yeah. The thing that I'm trying to sort out, and I don't actually have a dog in this fight particularly, Jason, so don't think that I'm setting you up here, but the change in the cost of QSBS is about 17 billion, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. So QSBS was going to cost about 45 billion over 10 years. Now it's going to cost about 62, just to kind of put it in perspective. Do you think we're going to get enough people to do more angel investing to make it worth $17 billion in extra spend at the national level over the next decade? I guess it's kind of the value trade-off.
Probably. And the people who make that money, or the people who save that money, my view of them is they go invest it. So these are like the most frisky gamblers in the space. So if somebody like me were to save money on QSBS or some seed fund, do they just take the money and then, like some Italian rich family, redo their castle and hoard the money? No, they go invest it. They're frisky. They're going to go find the next Airbnb. They're going to go do the next investment. So I think even with the savings, you got to ask yourself, how many more companies get built? I would say it's like 10, 20% more companies get built because of this. 10, 20% more money gets invested. And then these people are frisky recyclers. They go spend the money. So
if it's 10 or 20% more, that's cheap.